Hi, Beth. And of course, the tornado. I'm in Huntsville. And so the tornado siren is literally in our backyard. You hear that?
Uh-huh. Well, now I
Mhm.
do that you pointed it out.
Mhm. So it's the first Wednesday of the month, apparently. But yeah, there is no sleeping through that at all.
No kidding.
So living in Huntsville has been real fun. So if it's not the tornado siren that's in the backyard, well, his current house is really close to the base, and they do a lot of blasting with old bombs, I guess, I didn't know bombs could expire, but apparently they do. And so they blast them all the time. And so it literally sounds like the Civil War sometimes when I'm doing these types of calls. Like the house is rattling, and I'm like, yeah, our next house is gonna be as far away from the base as possible because it scares the crap out of me.
I bet.
Yeah, but it's been fun, different environment for sure.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah, he was explaining that to me, and I was like, I did not know bombs had expiration dates, but I guess it makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, it is officially 12 o'clock, so I'm sure we'll have some other people that will join us a little bit later. But welcome to week 2 of Empowering Excellence. We're so glad that you guys have been able to join us. Today's guest, I'm excited to have, it's our very own Robin Ricks, who not only is on our board, but she has a new role with Manufacture Alabama that I'm going to let her kind of tell you guys all about. So, congratulations, Robin, on your new role.
Thank you.
We have a VP in our presence, so that is super exciting.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. I really maintained most of the same portfolio of responsibilities as I've transitioned into this new role, but taken on some advocacy work. So I'm spending a little bit more time over at the State House, making sure that our state's legislature is really doing a good job of passing legislation that is good for business and good for the people of Alabama and not the other way around.
I love it, and that's going to be super exciting. So, does that mean you get to spend a lot more time in DC?
I will spend a little bit of time up there. We do some advocacy work with our federal delegation, but
Mhm.
really the foundation of support that Manufacturer Alabama offers is at the state level. We're really fortunate in the US to have a really strong National Association of Manufacturers. We all call them NAM. They're an excellent
Mhm.
partner and they really do a good job of taking care of us in DC.
Well, awesome, and congratulations again. That is super exciting.
Thank you.
So, we're going to follow the same format as last week. If you guys have questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat box and I will be sure to read those aloud. But we want this to be just an open conversation and just some girl time for us to talk about some great things and how we can empower each other to do great things in the workplace. So, we're going to jump into question number 1. Can you share a personal story of overcoming a gender related obstacle in your career?
Sure. I'm actually going to take us all way back and talk to you a little bit about kind of the origins of my experiences with gender bias, which actually started out in my childhood home. I had a really lovely and in many ways idyllic upbringing, but one day my younger brother and I, as we were having some kind of altercation while we were playing, I'm sure I was bossing him around, he turned to me and said, Robin, women are just so illogical. And I was simultaneously infuriated and wounded by
Mhm.
this information as it was washing over me. And upon further interrogation, I learned that he'd been taught this by my very precious father.
Mhm.
Um, and, kind of hearing this implication that somehow my lack of a Y chromosome meant that I was inherently incapable of logic and reasoning really set me on a trajectory to disprove it. And to this day, generalized characterizations of women really raise my hackles. When I got older, I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. And of course, my parents were very encouraging of this pathway for me. But when I made the decision to change my major in college from pre med to education, I was met with kind of interesting feedback, again, from my, really lovely dad, where he said, honey, I think this is great. I think you really want to be a mother. And, if you're a physician, then, you won't have time to be at home, with your family and your kids. And I couldn't put my finger on it then, but I found it to be really deeply insulting. And so
Hmm.
now, my husband laughs every time I tell these stories and calls them my either my superhero or supervillain origin stories. And says, Robin, I haven't won an argument since 2007 because I've never met anyone more logical, reasoned, or capable and principled than you are. And
Hmm.
I think without intending to, what really happened through those interactions is I learned that, um, you know, oftentimes people have these internalized ideas of what women are capable of and where their ceilings are. And this is not the case for all, but a lot of men, feel this
Hmm.
way. And I'm just not having any of it. I just know, and I think everybody else, that's joining us today knows really deep in their bones and in their marrow that you can be a really exceptional, connected partner and parent while also being tremendously professionally successful. And so now, you fast forward to me as a 35-year-old. I'm the vice president at a really highly respected statewide trade association and the founder of a nonprofit organization with the mission of teaching young girls that there really is no limit to the opportunities that exist for you in any career pathway that you're interested in. And you do not have to sacrifice, the ideals of being, someone with a family and also tremendously successful as a woman. So I think that, that has really driven me from a young age, and really informs a lot of the decision making that I make today.
Well, that is awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Robin. Being a mother of a son and a daughter, I have to constantly put myself on watch for making sure that I'm not imposing different beliefs based on their gender, which is
Yes.
really, really more difficult than I thought it would be. So, like with my daughter, I'm making sure she knows how to wash her own clothes, how to do dishes and cook and clean. And then with my son, I'm not setting those same expectations for him. And so I really had to have a shift in my parenting style. But then also have seen because my parents live in the same subdivision as we do. So they are really, really active in their lives. And seeing my dad make certain demands of my daughter that he doesn't make of my son, we have to be more cognizant of how we're treating even our own kids to make sure that we are not passing on our biases onto another generation. So thank you so much for
Absolutely.
sharing that story.
Absolutely.
The next question is what changes or improvements would you like to see in the workplace regarding gender inclusivity? Say that three times fast.
Yes, yes, gender inclusivity is a tongue twister. I think, coming from a world where I spend a lot of time thinking about big P policy, and that's policy that goes into place at the state level and kind of state and federal investment in workforce programs. I mean, this is something that we just, live and breathe and think about all the time here in Montgomery. I think that we've got to also really simultaneously turn some attention to little p policy and what company policies are in place and how are they affecting and what unintended consequences do they have on your workforce, and really putting some things into place that not just that don't only focus on getting individuals into your place of work, but also how are you retaining your workforce, and in particular how are you retaining young parents and
Mhm.
mothers. um, I think we've all been, socialized that, moms take on a lot more of the care responsibilities at home. And that's a larger conversation and, maybe a problem that we're not going to solve today or here with this group. But there are things that we can all be doing in our workplaces that during those few years where you have young children,
Mhm.
that we don't de-incentivize people financially to stay in the workforce, and we don't de-incentivize people financially to take care of their children.
That is so true. Of course, studies are now coming out about how women had to make a mass exit from the workforce post COVID. And we literally are having conversations every day now of how to re engage them, how to bring them back into the workforce, making sure we have those flexible policies in place to allow them to be their authentic self, whether that's in motherhood or whatever aspect of life that they have, and making sure that we are cognizant of that and able to allow them to be in the workforce because it's been so hard. And you and I both have children, so we know the constant battle that we have within ourselves of making sure that we are balancing life and work together and making sure we're there for our kids, but also the guilt trip that we have, even though even now I work for an amazing company that is completely flexible with how I spend my time, but I still feel guilty when I'm having to take a day off to do something for my kids. And that's just something that
Mhm.
has just been historically in our blood.
Mhm.
And it's still hard to get the guilt to just leave us alone and let us just live our lives for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important too. I think it's why, we have to be really careful about the language that we use around these policies and that we make them available for fathers and men as well, because that also assists in alleviating the burden. So if our partners, whether they be male or female, also feel like they can go and take a sick day, to take care of one of the sick kids, that is as important as we think about kind of a larger movement towards equality of opportunity for women.
Good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So, how do you promote a culture of mentorship and allyship among colleagues?
Sure. I think I heard something actually recently from a fellow woman in the manufacturing industry that I thought really put words to this beautifully. She said to find your mirror. And I think when find your people who can be your mirror. And when I think about some people who are really influential to my career and to my success, I think about these colleagues and peers that I've built a lot of trust with, that I also tremendously respect. And so when we give each other feedback, there is no defensiveness, there is no pretense, it's not competitive, it is honesty, and it is a tremendous gift if you're looking to accelerate your career. So I think, being a person of integrity and building trust with people that you respect is really an important way to promote those kinds of cultures of allyship and mentorship. And I think also, you have to get comfortable at some point in your career flexing that muscle of being honest
Mhm.
with those around you. And people can only receive. Are y'all still there? My
Mhm.
screen flashed at me. Okay. People can only receive your honesty when they trust you.
Mhm.
So, all of these things are connected to one another. And, it's something that I think about a lot and I really value in my relationships at work.
And I know this is not a question, but you kind of brought up a good point about making sure you have a good tribe and that you're surrounded by other women. So just talk to me. I know because we're involved in so many different groups together that you have a pretty solid tribe of people around you. So just talk to us about the importance of that tribe and if you've had anybody that's maybe been a mentor or a sponsor that you would love to share a story about.
Absolutely. Well, I would be I mean, Sierra knows this person, and so the first place I'm going to start is with my colleague Amanda Salazar on our
Mhm.
team. She's the vice president of membership and communication here at Manufacture Alabama, and we have had, these unique experiences over these years working together, where we can anticipate what the other is going to need in an important, and high stakes environment, which we're often in when we're hosting really large conferences, um, and where there's an expectation of perfection in your delivery. And we can kind of look at each other and say, I've got it, and fully believe and know that the other person has got it and they are going to deliver at the level of excellence that you would deliver if you'd done it yourself. And that is just a really beautiful thing, and something I do not take for granted. But somebody else that I would like to shout out that's actually on the call today is Beth Walker McBride. Beth was a very early mentor for me in my career. When I was looking for my first job in Montgomery, she said, Robin, I can't pay you exactly what you're making right now, but I tell you what, I will invest in you. I will connect you with everyone that is in my network. I will support you. I will put you in spaces where you will be able to grow. And she delivered on that and continues to deliver on that to this day, and is still one of my greatest, cheerleaders and supporters and confidants. We actually had lunch yesterday. When you have opportunities to build relationships like that with women, and particularly other women in leadership, it is really transformative because you can see yourself represented in a place that you want to be, and you can see a real pathway to get there.
So to just echo, and you went down the path that I was hoping you would go down. Um, I have watched you and Amanda in action several times, and it's almost like this unspoken twin language that you guys have, even though you're not related. And you guys have such a dynamic relationship together and do amazing things. So it has been fun to watch you guys just kind of maneuver and support each other. So I'm glad that you did take the opportunity to talk about that. And then Beth Walker, of course, is an amazing member of Sherman Montgomery, and she is one that's always been a huge sponsor and ally for women. Beth and I have had a lot of meaningful discussions, and she has basically talked to me every time I've been in a career transition as well. So, Beth, thank you for all that you do to support women, especially being a women owned business owner. You are definitely someone that all of us should be able to look up to for sure. It's all about that tribe. So, have you noticed a shift in attitudes towards women in leadership roles throughout your career?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've told you guys how old I was earlier. I'm not, 70 years old. I don't have, just a tremendous runway to look back on. But in the, 15 years that I have been in the workforce, I have certainly seen a shift, most of it good and some of it bad. I think it's really interesting, when when people feel like there's a limited number of seats at any particular table, kind of the game of, crabs in a bucket where somebody's about to get out and somebody else reaches up and pulls them back down, into the bottom of the bucket. You can see how toxic that is. And it can be dangerous when someone makes it to the table and then turns around and looks back and says, well, I figured out how to get here on my own. I don't have any interest of help in helping you. You need to figure it out.
Mhm.
And I think I feel a real sense of responsibility to join the legions of women who do not feel that way, who take the opportunity to sit at those tables and from their higher vantage point, turn around and look back and point out the landmines and point out the potholes and tell people what to avoid so that they can all join us at the table. I don't know if you guys watched the Barbie movie
Mhm.
last summer, but the line towards the end where the, characterized version of the Barbie founder looks at Barbie and says, we mothers stand still so that our daughters can see how far they've come. really meant something to me. I think I realized, okay, my job here is to work hard and get as far as I can, and then stand there and be a measuring stick for my daughters and for everybody else's daughters so that they can look back and say, look how far we got. Thank you, Mom, for getting us this far forward, and we will take it from here. So I think a lot about that, and I'm really proud of the direction that I think we're going, and of this movement, towards really equal opportunities for women, across the board.
That is awesome. And yes, as you guys know, I bring my daughter just about anywhere that I possibly can to expose her to different things. Um, Robin actually had a chance to meet her a couple weeks ago, finally face to face, at a what was the name of that event, Robin, with Women's Foundation? It was the
They had an advocacy day, Capitol
Thank
Hills, here in
yes,
Montgomery. Mhm.
and brought my daughter there so that she can just see and have that exposure. And so now she's going to be working with the Women Foundation to do a young girls and advocacy group program through them. So it's just making sure that we're exposing our daughters to more than just running a household and being great mothers. We want to make sure that we're exposing them to the boardroom, and the golf courses and everything else, so that they can make those decisions on their own, but also be amazing leaders and women to carry us forward once we retire, which is hopefully sooner rather than later, right?
Amen to that.
But yeah, but I think it's really, really important. And then you brought up another good point. I know this is all about women in excellence, but there are some men that are doing great jobs with being
Mhm.
advocates and sponsors for women. And for me, I just took a new role, and my boss said something to me that just impacted me, and I didn't know that I needed it until he said it. And he basically said, he's like, I see you as a powerful woman in industry, and I love what you're doing, and I want to support that. And I want to make sure that you feel empowered in everything that you do. And when he said that, I realized no one in my career had ever said that to me from a male leader, and how impactful that was, and how empowered I felt after he said that, and will continue to feel every day when I feel like I'm up against a wall that I need to figure out how to break down or overcome. That is always going to resonate with me. So, Robin, can you share maybe a male that has been a good sponsor or leader for you?
I've had a number, of
Mhm.
them throughout my life. I'm glad that you brought this up. I I think I've been really fortunate. I don't know if it's all necessarily through strategy, and what of it maybe happened just out of pure luck. But really, at each place I've worked, there has been someone who saw potential in me and was willing to invest. And I had that experience when I worked at, HPT, or Hyundai Power Transformers. A lot of you guys know, Tony Wojciechowski, and Tony is a hoot and a half.
Mhm.
But Tony said, Robin, I will give you opportunities. If you come and work here, I will give you opportunities. And he made good on his word. In fact, we had a congressional visit by, Congresswoman Roby at the time. She came to tour the facility, and I was asked to deliver the plant overview to her when she came, before our tour began. And I was so pleased and honored. And she's just, was a lovely representative of our state and continues to do a great job advocating for us, in her new role with Bradley. But when it was over, another friend of mine who happened to be, kind of aware of the political and kind of cultural, nuances of working for a Korean owned company, she said, wait, they let you present? And I said, yeah. And she said, that's really uncommon, particularly in Korean culture. And
Mhm.
it had not registered for me until she said it, that Tony had given me that chance and had put me in front of that group. These are individuals, that were a part of her team that I now work with in the political world all the time. And we have this history that would not have been there or available to me had I not had that advocate. And then when I came to work here at Manufacture Alabama, the founder and original president of the organization here, George Clark, um, he happened to meet me only because Tony asked me to deliver a presentation to Manufacture Alabama. HPT had been invited to speak at the HR and Workforce Development Committee here at MA, and Tony asked me to develop the slide deck, and I didn't think anything of it. And then we got here on the day, and he said, "Robin, you developed this. You take it from here." And after the initial panic kind of washed over me, I delivered the presentation. I was familiar with the information, and George Clark here at MA offered me a job afterwards. He said, "You need to come and work for me." It's been really important. And he also invested in me and was willing to put me in rooms and spaces with people to, grow my network and grow my opportunities. So you're absolutely right. There is a critical role for male allies to women in business and in industry. And without those, the women's movement couldn't be where it was today.
Absolutely. And you also brought up another great point about as women, we always have to be ready. Always be ready to jump in on that opportunity because you never know when you're going to get that opportunity again. And always make sure that you're speaking up and making your presence known when you get invited into those rooms. I think it was Carla Harris that said, if you have a seat at the table, say something at the table. Like, don't just sit there and be at the table, say something and make sure that you are making your presence known. So, those are two great points, Robin. Thank you for sharing that amazing story of how you got to where you are today. So, that's amazing.
Yes. Yes.
And our last question on paper, maybe not the last question that I have for you, is how do you navigate the fine line between assertiveness and likability in a professional setting?
I think this really, when I thought about this question after you sent it to me, I think it really harkens back to the trust and integrity that you build with the people that you work closely with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll reference a really specific story. Just last week, I was on a call talking about policy around state investment in the childcare industry in the state of Alabama. And twice on that call, there was a phrase used by Manufacture Alabama's new president and CEO, John, who has become a dear friend and is a great leader. But he referenced something that we hear, this rhetoric that we hear all the time, that somehow if your children are in childcare, that you're letting someone else raise your children.
Mm-hmm.
That is letting someone else raise your kids. And it has bothered me for a long time, and I didn't know how to articulate what my frustration was with it. And so after the call had concluded, I went to his office and I said, "Can I be honest with you about something?" And he said, "Yes, because we have built that kind of, rapport." And I said, "When I drop my kids off at the same daycare that you used to drop your children off, I don't think to myself, thank goodness they're there to raise my kids for me. And I don't think that you feel like they raised your kids for you either. I think you feel like you're raising your children, don't you?" And he said, "Oh my God, yes." And I said, "It hurts my feelings when you
Mm-hmm.
say that." Um, and it just hadn't occurred to him the way that that was being received.
Mm-hmm.
So because I had built trust and integrity, and he knew that what I was saying was not coming from a place of judgment, but from a place of truth and honesty, he was able to receive that information and really change the way that he communicates, about these issues. And so I think that if you have integrity and if you are, honest and truthful with the people around you, it is fairly easy to deftly navigate
Mhm.
being assertive and saying something that's often difficult, while also doing it in a way that doesn't damage your professional reputation or your relationships with the people around you.
You bring up the old phrase, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And I think that that is the key. It wasn't um, anything offensive that you brought up in your conversation with John, but you just had that open conversation of how you felt, which I'm sure he resonated with. And then it brought his eyes open to how the impact of that statement was. So I think for women in the workforce, it's just how we approach problems, how we say things is going to carry a lot of weight in helping those conversations move forward. With me, I just inherited a team of, well, a couple of weeks ago when I inherited the team, there were 10 and we just hired two more people. So now it's 12. Um, so I am, and of course, when you're the new manager on the block, people are always going to be nervous. And I think I'm going to give kudos to myself on making sure that that first email that I sent out to my team set the framework because I wanted to have one on ones with each of them. And I set the framework as this one on one is specifically for me to learn how I can support you today and how I can support your growth tomorrow. And I had so many of them tell me, well, nobody's ever asked me those questions. I was like, yeah, that's why I gave it to you ahead of time because I kind of figured that, and wanted to give you guys the opportunity to really think through those two questions and come back with some solid answers because I really do want to know how I can nurture their growth
Mm-hmm.
being their leader. So, having those conversations. And then, of course, I've had to have some difficult conversations with some people that may not like the way that I came into the company or that I'm going to manage my team. But I've been able to really make sure that I am methodical in my thoughts and careful with my phrases and my words to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that I articulate my message, but it's in an assertive but kind and professional way.
Absolutely. I think something else that, as you were talking, really also was important was the power of asking questions instead
Mhm.
of making statements. And,
Mhm.
when you talk about walking in and you asked them, what can I do to support you right now? And what can I do to support you down the road? Meant more to them than you walking in and saying, or I would guess that it meant
Mhm.
more to them than you walking in and saying, I'm going to support you right now and I'm going to support you down the road. It's like, well, how do you even know you're going to do that? And it's the same way I, communicated with John. It was like, do you feel like you didn't raise your children? I certainly feel like I'm raising mine. Like that just, it's different. But it also, if you're comfortable asking questions, I think that's also how you end up with great mentors and sponsors. When you walk in the door somewhere, instead of guessing, what to do when you don't know what to do, and when something is broken, instead of hiding it or covering it up, and letting that, fire fester and burn, and then it comes out down the road, ask someone, is this what you expect this to go like? Is this a common outcome? How would you handle this situation? Those sorts of questions are going to create, really endear you to leaders within your organization because it shows an interest in growing, an interest in learning, and for those that work for you, it shows an investment and also a value in the knowledge that they bring to the table. So, also, if you're trying to navigate that fine line between assertiveness and likability, fall back on questions. It's also important when it comes to allyship because sometimes you hear someone say something and that there's stank all over what they've just said, and you're trying to figure out how to respond to it. My favorite go to is, I'm sorry, I don't think I understood you. Could you repeat that? Or what did you mean by that again? I'm not sure I understand. And those sorts of questions and phrases,
Mhm.
it is amazing how powerful they can be.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robin. This has been fabulous. I'm going to open it up for questions from the group. So either you can unmute yourself or feel free to use the chat and I will read the questions out loud. But does anybody have questions for Robin? I know Janelle does. Yes, I see you. You're the first one popping up on my screen. And I might have one more question for you, Robin, actually. There's one question we did not get to. I know you talked about your mentors throughout your career, but can you share a mentorship success story where you witnessed significant growth in a female colleague?
Yeah, I certainly can. I think, there are so many colleagues that I have not mentored, but I have watched, really blossom through their mentorship relationships. And I don't want to tell anyone else's story, though. Maybe I just need to send you a list of people that you should invite on here to interview, and just some really, compelling stories. Um, I tell you what, though, I will talk a little bit about kind of a new friend of mine. Um, Her name is Lillian Brand, and she is the Vice President of External Affairs at Women's Foundation of Alabama, that Sierra talked about earlier. Just for context and reference, Women's Foundation of Alabama is a statewide organization that does advocacy work on behalf of women in Alabama, but is also a grant-making entity. So they provide significant grant funds that they have raised to women-owned organizations and women-run organizations all through the state that are designed to support women and girls and create economic, opportunity. But Lillian actually worked for um, Paul Shashi, who's a communications person that deals in the political world, and participated in the Women's Policy Institute through Women's Foundation, and had such an excellent experience there, and developed a relationship. It really impressed and developed a relationship with the CEO of Women's Foundation. And when they had an opportunity come available, Lillian, rose to the top of the heap. And Lillian is, very young, and stepped into that role and is doing a brilliant job. So I just, when you seek out opportunities, like joining a group like the Women's Policy Institute, when you step out on a limb and apply for something like that and complete it, often the best opportunities of your career are going to emerge from that. So, certainly an excellent success story in a group I'm really happy to amplify.
And I'm glad you mentioned Lillian because I actually need her email address. If you'll send that to me after we get done, that'd be great. I need to ask her a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Let's also take the moment, and I hate that I didn't ask a specific question about this, but will you talk about GLAM?
Sure, sure. I'm glad you brought it up. GLAM is a nonprofit organization that, and GLAM stands for Girls Learning About Manufacturing. It's a 501(c)(3) that I was, fortunate enough to found here within Manufacture Alabama. The mission of that organization is to create interest in careers in manufacturing among the next generation of women who will enter the workforce, with the vision of there being no such thing as a non-traditional career path for women. We do that through a couple of really great programs. We do camps during the summer where girls come out and enjoy, kind of a smattering of activities at an advanced manufacturing training center at one of the community colleges in their area, and do some STEM education and activities. They get to go on plant tours, and just really engage with women who are already having successful careers in manufacturing so that they can see themselves represented there. We also partner with individual companies to have VIP plant and facility tours. Our, inaugural partner in that was MBUSI, or Mercedes-Benz, in Vance, Alabama. We started doing tours with them back in 2022. So we're in our third year of partnership with them now. We do a VIP tour and a luncheon and kind of activity session with area high school girls. And they get an opportunity to go in and see just how interesting and beautiful the advanced manufacturing facilities are right here in the state of Alabama. I mean, these girls are in the backyard of, one of the most impressive manufacturing operations in the world, and this household name and brand, and they've never had an opportunity to see what's really going on in there. So we've had really enjoyed seeing the light kind of go on in their eyes when they realize what opportunities lie for them there. And then they have the opportunity to see what educational pathways they can pursue. Like, all this infrastructure is already laid for them. They need only to apply, and to see that happening. And it's just been a really beautiful thing to be a part of.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I didn't want to miss that opportunity to share what you guys are doing with that space,
Sure,
and I love it.
I
I'm so
appreciate it.
excited.
Thank you.
Anybody come up with a question for Robin?
Vera, I do.
Hey, Larissa.
Hey, Robin. So I'm curious. We are at my company, we are in on the infancy stages of establishing a mentoring program. And I'm curious if you have any tips or tricks or advice for getting the ball rolling, so to speak. We know we want to have one. We're just not really sure. We're really small on kind of how to get that started. And even more specifically, I'm in a male-dominated field, much like manufacturing, so we have very few female leaders within our firm that can serve as mentors to the very few women that we have. So any ideas or, like I said, tips or tricks?
Absolutely. I think the first thing, when you're developing a really successful mentoring program, especially if you're trying to formalize it within your organization, is to try to figure out what outcomes are you looking for, and try to be as specific as possible. And then use that information to help you match your mentors and your mentees. And then also, what I have found is that often the mentors are more nervous than the mentee. And so giving your mentors a lot of education, and a lot of advice on what questions are reasonable, what questions aren't, ideas on what to do with their mentee, those sorts of things, while they seem silly and probably self-explanatory to a lot of us that work in and around the HR arena, because we're comfortable working around people and providing coaching. That's not always the case for a lot of these people who enroll in these mentorship programs. So those two things are really important. And then I think third, when you're educating your mentees before they start their relationship, remind them that they really need to try to bring something to the table. They can't just walk in and sit down and stare at their mentor and expect brilliance to just pour out, and their career to, simultaneously rise. They need to be, prepared to get to know and engage with their mentor in a successful way. So providing them with some coaching and education, I think those three things will help you along the way. I hope you'll let us know how it goes.
I will. I appreciate the tips and tricks. It's funny that you had mentioned we already are kind of we've got the um, some of those initiatives kind of started where we're thinking about who will we're going to seek mentors. First, we're going to just kind of give people the opportunity to volunteer, and then
Sure.
if that doesn't produce enough, I guess, viable um, candidates, we will reach out to people
Yeah,
that we would like to see that. And so I think part of what I'm struggling with there is finding the kind of education that you're talking about for the mentors. I mean, I know obviously from an HR perspective, when I have an HR person, how I educate them on the job and the responsibilities and things, but I'm finding there are some similarities and some overlap, but I'm trying to figure out, I guess, and navigate where to find the resources um, to educate the mentors themselves on what is appropriate and those sorts of things.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. When we were early stages of GLAM, we faced this challenge and actually I'll be honest with you all, we had a mentorship, program attempt that wasn't terribly successful, and we learned a lot from it. But I will actually, if Sierra, if you wouldn't mind to connect us, I will send you a contact that we use to do some mentor training that was really useful. So I'll share
That
that
would
with
be
you as well.
very appreciated.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you
And
learn more
Larissa,
from your failures sometimes.
Larissa, there is a group here in Alabama called Momentum. I am actually a mentor for them, and they have an amazing framework for their mentorship program. So it might, Katie Hanna might be a good contact for you to kind of bounce some ideas and get some feedback from them. But they have a great mentor and leadership program.
Okay. All right. I'm making notes as we go. I'll probably reach out to you to get that contact information, Sierra. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Anybody else have questions?
Hi, Robin. This is Jonelle. I have a question. You talked earlier a little bit about the situation with your brother and his gender bias. So, fast forwarding to today, or in your current role, and I guess I would say in a
Mhm.
male-dominated environment, that most of us probably experience, that gender bias, sort of equates to like an implicit bias, where
Mhm.
some people are just unconsciously doing it. So, how
Mhm.
would you advise someone on combating or dealing with that situation today?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I think it is, if I'm really candid, it's something that I'm still learning how to navigate. It is amazing in the, role that I'm in, here with Manufacture Alabama. I will be at a conference that we are hosting, and, executives, from other companies or from, from government will like defer to my husband, like assuming that he's the one who works for Manufacture Alabama. It's like, no, he's like, I don't know anything about this. I'm just an accountant. So it's something I still encounter. I think that as I hate to keep throwing it back to, really being honest and communicating openly with your team. But I think that, in particular, people like our, President and CEO, John, I mean, he makes sure to elevate Amanda and I, in public spaces and give us opportunities to be the face of things so that people know us. And he is really intentional about introducing us. So I think probably the answer to your question is figure out who your ally is, who's going to maybe help you address that in a roundabout way without you having to say, excuse me, which is often what I want to do. Um, you know, Having someone who's going to, say, have you met Janelle? Have you met Dr. McCullough? Because, she really is the expert in this area or this arena. You should talk with her. That has been probably the most effective way, but I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you for what to do in the moment other than try to keep your cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And we have one last question from Beth, and it is, how challenging is it to find a work-life balance?
Very. It is very challenging. And some days I think we all do it better than others. And some day we do worse. It just, kind of depends on what's happening. I'll tell you what, though, there are two things that I have outsourced in my life that I think really help to save my sanity. And part of this is just, a little bit of privilege. When you start to make a little bit more money, you have opportunities to outsource these things. But I have a housekeeper that comes and helps me keep my house in order. And God bless her, my angel of a mother-in-law helps with our laundry, because those two things were causing a lot of strife, in our home and in, my relationships with my family. And if I was going to work full time, there was just no way
Mhm.
for us to stay on top of it as a family unit. So figure out what you can outsource and outsource it. And those things that you can't, outsource, then attack things, step by step and checklists and plans and all the things. And then really candidly, I think as women, one of the most important decisions that we make, or really as professionals, gender excluded, one of the most important decisions that you make is who you choose to have as your life partner. And I have a really excellent life partner in my husband, who is a really involved father, a really supportive partner, and has no problem being the one who cooks dinner 50% of the time and does dishes 50% of the time. And, all of those things, we have a fairly equal distribution of labor. So maybe that's another larger conversation for us to have about how we educate, our friends of the other gender or other genders, on how to, be a supportive partner to the women in your lives. But it is with great difficulty is the truthy answer for you, Beth.
You are right, and amen to the outsourcing crew.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do without our housekeeper, because our house would probably be on, I don't know, probably on somebody's show, because I just traveling a lot and having kids that are
Yeah.
involved in activities. Like, the last thing I want to do if I have the rare free Saturday or Sunday at home with nothing to do is spend it scrubbing bathroom toilets. Like, I'm
No, you
just
want to
really
be.
want to just sit down and
Mhm.
rest. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is so important. Well, that is all. We ran over by 4 minutes, so we're not too far off. But thank you guys so much for joining us. So next week we will have Barbara Wells. She will be our week 3 speaker, and a lot of you are familiar with her from SHRM. She is a retired EEOC attorney, so we're excited to have her back. And then our 4th week will be Dr. Nicole Thompson, who has her own consulting business, and she'll be here to talk about diversity and all things women. And also, you will have a different facilitator next week. We will have Dr. Janet Chappelle, who will be running our last 2 sessions. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you found it valuable. And the pre-record, or the post-record, I should say, will be available probably on Monday of next week. So have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.